Hello students, welcome to the daily news analysis. I hope you all are doing great. So today we'll be understanding the important news articles of 4th of April 2022 and I'm your educator Prithviraj Singh. Guys, today there are some important news in the editorial page of the Hindu. We'll try understanding the articles. On the editorial page, it was a beautiful article about the Ukraine peace plan, and the author is contemplating that whether it is possible, can we have a peace plan in Ukraine, because Russia isn't stopping, right? And so the whole article is deliberating that what should be the peace plan, right? So guys, the author is trying to say that it is now a virtual proxy war, right? And with America and NATO providing the military assistance to Ukraine. Many feel that the NATO and America is not actually providing the military assistance, but the fact is that Ukraine has today become a proxy battleground, and definitely, certainly, NATO and America is providing the military assistance to Ukraine, right? And that is the reason why it is able to stand up to the onslaught by Russia for more than 30 days. We know that the Ukrainian president Zelensky has time and again talked about the neutrality talks, right? That means he wants that the area be declared as neutral. So he want to discuss neutrality, but what is neutrality hasn't yet been I mean, no other country including the West and the NATO and the America has tried to go ahead with the question of neutrality as voiced by Zelensky. Guys, the world is standing by and no one is coming to for the peace process, allowing the conflict to continue, and the conflict has crossed 1 month and it is still undergoing. Guys, Zelensky is ready to discuss the neutrality, and Ukraine has become a pawn, right, in the power game between America or the West and Russia, right? So as we have pawn, so similarly Ukraine has become a pawn in the hands of West and Russia. The West also needs to play more active role and try to devise a peace plan, right? So they are deliberating about the peace plan, and the America is also appealing India to come up with a peace plan for the resolution of Ukrainian issue. Russia's concerns about the further eastward push of NATO are to be properly resolved, and there are being talks especially in this article that why not have a shuttle diplomacy, right, where the countries would mediate between Russia, so they would act as interlocutors acceptable to both Russia and Ukraine, but none is taking action. United Nations Security Council all have failed to take any action apart from the economic sanctions, right? But again, the economic sanctions also have some adverse or detrimental impact as viewed by the author. The West should consider its current obsession with imposing additional sanctions on Russia, because sanctions are not helping anymore. Russia is devising its own economic alliance with China, and definitely the Russian invasion of Ukraine has seen the growing nexus between China and Russia, right? And Russia is also trading in its own currency, right? So there are many takeaways from this war. At the same time, there are being talks that these sanctions would have put on the Russian economy. Definitely, the Russian economy would have also adversely affected, because sanctions would definitely, go deep down into the Russian economy, and Russian economy is being predicted to plunge by anything between 12 to 15% over the next few months. Means Russian economy would dip down by 12 to 15% in the coming few months. In this sense, the jury is still out on whether economic pain of this kind would lead any country, at least in the short and the medium term, to alter its mindset, right? Because the economic sanctions were also imposed on Iran post as you all would be knowing, post JCPOA, Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. Before that, Iran also had economic sanctions because of its nuclear activities, but when JCPOA was signed on the condition that Iran must stop its nuclear material the production of its nuclear material, and America would remove all the sanctions on Iran, right? But we all know that in 2018, Donald Trump, the president of the America, withdrew from JCPOA, and then and he said that Iran is not stopping its nuclear stockpile. Iran is not actually stopping the manufacturing of or the enrichment of uranium, and there is no point of such deals, and that is the reason why Trump withdrew from JCPOA in the year 2018. So they will definitely ask you the question on JCPOA, interlinking this article, right? And we have discussed in our earlier lectures. You can see my previous daily news analysis classes. Definitely you'll find about the detail about JCPOA, right? So the author is trying to say that Iran also was not afraid of the sanctions, and it continued its nuclear stockpile. So therefore, putting sanctions, is this model of putting sanctions workable? That is something has to be pondered about. Now, at the same time, there are unintended consequences of the overuse of sanctions. Means if you would overuse the sanctions, then definitely it would be detrimental not only for Russia but to the whole world, right? Because it could reverse the process of globalization, right? Because in globalization we opened up our economy, we removed all the trade barriers, right? That means Russia or China can sell its commodity in India, right? And we are definitely importing the defense equipments from Russia. We are importing them from China, right? So that is the beauty of globalization, correct? But post the imposition of sanctions, it would see a reverse trend of globalization, and the countries would not be ready to integrate with the world economy, and they would try to enhance their protectionist tendencies. Means they would close their borders, and they would not integrate themselves into the world economy, fearing the Russian war in Ukraine, right? So therefore the author says that it could reverse the process of globalization that has allowed the modern world to prosper, right? So reverse globalization may take place. Guys, the facts which are being mentioned here are very important for those preparing for the law exam as well as the UPSC aspirants. And the author also says that these sanctions may also increase or exacerbate the food shortages in the low income countries, because today the world is interconnected. If something happens in let's say Delhi, it would have its impact on Jaipur. Similarly, if something happens on Russia, it would definitely have a detrimental impact on the poor countries, right? So therefore the sanctions may not be the only only step to resolve this crisis, or only way to resolve its crisis. What is required is a peace plan where the whole and the major countries of the world, including India, should come forward. Now, these sanctions can also have deleterious consequences for much of the world, and the spillover effects of Russia-Ukraine conflict would, be long-lasting, right? So, in this sense, Russia has also exhausted its efforts. It's been more than 30 days. Almost 1.5 months is to come post the invasion of Ukraine, and even the 30-nation NATO should have displayed a degree of cohesion, unity in the face of the Russian onslaught, but that is also not being seen, right? So therefore the question of NATO, the question of NATO being an organization, that of America, is again making news, because there is no point in having such organizations if they cannot save the world, right? So one fallout of the current conflict in Ukraine is likely to be the further cementing of the already deepening Russia-China relations, right? As you all know that Russia is coming more close to China, and it would further strengthen, and it would lead to the rise of a new superpower in the world, surpassing America, that is China, right? Russia-China relationship to the next level and approximating to what existed before great communist divide, right? So before great communist divide, the Russia and China had very good relations, and the same is being seen now, right? So there is a need to revive the spirit of the Korean War of the 1950s, as said by China, and reshaping the whole, and this conflict would reshape the whole world energy map. As you all know that European countries which were more dependent on the Russian crude oil, they are looking towards west, towards America, towards Gulf. At the same time, countries like India and China may be coming close to Russia. Like oil flows to Europe, would thereupon comes mainly from the West Asia and the America. And China and India may become major importers of crude oil from Russia. So the whole world energy map would be changed, would be completely reshaped. India's stand till now, guys, India has remained absent from the voting at the United Nations General Assembly resolution against Russia. It has been 2 times that India has been absent, right? And that is the reason why America is also threatening India that they must, it is on shaky grounds, it is not clear with its decision, and if it continues this trade with Russia, then America may also impose sanctions called as AlAqsa on India, right? At the same time, this was largely based on India's long-term defense and other relationship with Russia, because you all know that India is purchasing Su-400 missiles from Russia, and the agreement was finalized in the year 2018 and the deal is to complete. But then America is threatening that if you go ahead with Su-400 missile procurement, then you may see sanctions under AlAqsa. So this could undergo changes. One might also anticipate a further churn in politics of West Asia. So even the West Asia may see some more political upheavals, more events, political events taking place, where the Abraham's Accord in 2020 seemed to bring a certain degree of normalcy and stability. Guys, I expect a question on Abraham Accords. Abraham Accord. Guys, there were a peace agreement between Iran, UAE and Bahrain. You all know that Israel is being, the Jews consider Palestine, Israel as their own area, right? As their own region, right? Culturally their own region. At the same time, the Arabs also consider it as their own occupation, right? So therefore, in 2020, Abraham Accords were being signed between Iran, UAE and Bahrain, and they were being mediated by America, right? And some and Iran gave a permission that UAE and Bahrain can open their embassy in Israel, right? At the same time, tourism etc. would also be promoted. We'll discuss it further. So it may not be too outlandish for both sides to consider the use of, because you know that Russia has threatened that it may use the nukes or the nuclear weapons, and all the fear which is actually surrounding nuclear, the use of nuclear weapons may be receding, and there are talks that both sides may consider the use of miniaturized nukes, right? They may not be full scale large nuclear weapons, but at least the miniaturized nukes with precision or drone delivery mechanisms, right? And if the Russia-Ukraine war were to persist, one could even envisage the possibility of the use of micro nuclear payloads, right? So there has been talks about the micro nuclear payloads and the miniaturized nuclear weapons, right? So in this sense, this article actually gives us many ideas about the crisis in Ukraine and how peace plan is very, very important, because the whole world has changed post Russian war invasion of Ukraine. I hope it is clear. So the article is talking about the same. We'll just read it. We'll try understanding the Abraham Accords. As we mentioned that the Abraham Accords in 2020 seem to bring certain degree of normalcy and stability in the Gulf region or in the Western Asia, but then it seems that the Russian Ukrainian crisis may also incite some kind of political upheaval in the West Asian region. Let us understand Abraham Accords. Guys, Abraham Accord, as I said, was between Israel, UAE and Bahrain, right? As you can see on the map, Israel, UAE and Bahrain, right? So these were the three nations involved, and definitely they were being mediated by America. In the year 2020, they were being finalized, and it is the first Arab-Israel peace deal in 26 years. And the agreement, as per the agreements, the UAE and Bahrain will establish their embassies and exchange ambassadors in Israel, right? They would also work together with Israel across a range of sectors, including tourism, trade, healthcare and security. So we are clear with Abraham Accords, the year and the countries which were involved: Israel, Bahrain and UAE. And we all know that India has also signed a free trade agreement recently with UAE, right? Because UAE is the seventh largest investor in India, and the third largest country in terms of India exporting its goods and services, right? So in this sense, it is very important. Abraham Accords also opens the door for Muslims across the world, because in Israel there is a place called as AlAqsa Mosque, AlAqsa Mosque. So AlAqsa Mosque is being believed to be the third holiest site in Islam, right, in Jerusalem, which is the place of Christ. So AlAqsa Mosque is being considered as the third holiest site in Islam, and the Abraham Accords would open the doors for Muslims around the world to visit the historic sites in Israel and to peacefully pray at AlAqsa Mosque in Jerusalem, which is the third holiest site in Islam. So very important, Abraham Accords. In the Islamic tradition, the Kaaba in Makkah is considered the holiest site, followed by the Prophet's mosque in Medina. So you all know about Makkah, Medina. And the third holiest site is AlAqsa Mosque in Jerusalem. So it has also been now opened for Muslims around the world. Now the reason is to bringing Israel, the UAE and Bahrain together reflects their shared concern about Iran's rising influence, because of the fact that Iran is clandestinely or secretly building its nuclear stock. So therefore it has led to the rise of Iran, and that is the reason why Israel, UAE and Bahrain are coming together in the region to counter Iran. And right, so Iran has been critical of both the deals. It would definitely be the Arab-Israel relation. Guys, since Israel got its independence in the year 1948, it has fought several wars with Arab neighboring countries. The persecuted Jews, right, who practice Judaism, Zoroastrianism, the persecuted Jews saw Israel as their promised home, right? So Jews believe Israel to be their promised home, while Arabs see it as an occupation, right? So this is a conflict, and now the Abraham Accords has sought to bring normalcy and stability in the Western Asian region, but possibly the Russian invasion of Ukraine may as I said, increase the political upheavals in this region. So you have to watch these developments very closely. I hope it is clear. Moving to the next news article, guys, on the screen, very important for all the law and the UPSC examining aspirants. A far-reaching verdict that ends a regressive exception. Guys, this article talks about the marital rape, right? And we all know that section 375, which talks about rape in India, exempt the husband, in coming under the purview of section 375, right? That means section 375 has an exemption to the husband if he commits rape against his wife, right? So we all know that marital rape is not a crime as per exception given in section 375 of IPC. Now this was the case, right, till 23rd March 2022, right? On 23rd of March 2022, in the case of, very important, and I expect strongly a question on this, in a case Rishikesh Sahu versus State of Karnataka, the Karnataka High Court declared that pronounced the end of the marital rape exception, right? So the marital rape exception or exemption has been done away with by Karnataka High Court in Rishikesh Sahu versus State of Karnataka. So they may ask you about this, that Rishikesh Sahu versus State of Karnataka deals with what? So it is with respect to the end of the exemption given to the husbands for marital rape, right? But definitely until and unless the Supreme Court doesn't give the decision regarding the same, it is quite early to give our own judgments. But definitely the Karnataka High Court has set the ball rolling and it has declared that marital rape is also a crime, right? Now you all would be knowing that even in Delhi High Court there have been many petitions which are pending which sought to declare marital rape as crime, and even Delhi High Court has said that it violates the right to equality of women, it violates right to privacy, right to bodily integrity, right? So but then it is still sub judice and the court has yet to give its judgment. But before that, on March 23rd this year 2022, Karnataka High Court justice gave a very important judgment over declaring marital rape as crime, and it pronounced the end of the marital rape exemption, right? So the case has to be kept in mind, Rishikesh Sahu versus State of Karnataka, right? Now this led to the husband, because the case started in Karnataka, where the wife filed a criminal case against her husband due to the repeated acts of sexual assault she had to face, right? And the police registered her complaint under section 376 of IPC, and section 376 IPC talks about the punishments for rape, right? But the husband filed an application and to drop the charges of section 376, but the session judge rejected it, and this led to the husband approaching the High Court seeking to quash the criminal proceedings against him. Now Justice Nag Prasanna, the Chief Justice of the High Court Karnataka, refused to quash the charges of rape against the husband, and he held that if a man being a husband is exempted for his acts of sexual assault, it would destroy women's right to equality, Article 14, Article 15, correct? Article 21, which is right to privacy. Exception to the marital rape in IPC amounts to discrimination because a wife is treated as subordinate to husband, right? And the Justice Naga Prasanna said that a rape is a rape, a man is a man, be he husband, right? If he also commits the same to any women, be his wife, it would be considered, it would amount to a rape, which is a crime under section 375, right? He said that a man is a man, an act is an act, rape is a rape, but be it performed by a man, the husband, on the women, the wife, right? Guys, there have been also many previous cases, earlier judgments, especially Independent Thought versus Union of India, very, very important. Independent Thought versus Union of India, 2017. right? Here the Supreme Court of India diluted the provision, because earlier it was being declared that if the husband commits rape against his wife who is less than 15 years in age, then it would be considered as a rape and it would not get exemption under section 375 IPC. But this judgment of the year 2017, which is Independent Thought versus Union of India, actually diluted this provision and increased that limit of 15 years to 18 years. That means if a girl be a wife of a husband is being experiencing a sexual assault and she complains, then the husband may be persecuted, right? And the charges of the rape may be constituted against him, right? So in this sense, the Supreme Court diluted it and removed the exception to marital rape to a wife not below 15 years and made it 18 years, right? So in this sense, the more broader class is being included. Very important. Independent Thought versus Union of India 2017, right? So it also talks about marital rape. So we've discussed two important cases: Rishikesh Sahu versus State of Karnataka and Independent Thought versus Union of India 2017. I hope it is clear and expect a question on this. Here the court said clearly that the girl cannot be treated as a commodity having no say, right, over her body, or someone who has no right to deny sexual intercourse, right, guys? But there are problems also. Many thinkers say that consent of a woman is very difficult to prove in the court of law, right? I hope you are getting my point, and therefore it may also be misused. But there is also another act passed by the parliament called Domestic Violence Act. Domestic Violence Act. Now Domestic Violence Act comes in a direct conflict with the section 375, which exempts the husband committing the sexual assault against his wife, right? Because in Domestic Violence Act, even the emotional abuse is considered as an offense, right? So leave the physical abuse, even the emotional abuse is being considered as an offense, whereas 375 exempts the husband from the charges of rape, right? So there is a conflict between the Domestic Violence Act and section 375 IPC, right? So one thing, many thinkers, as I said, that are saying that it is the beautiful institution of marriage may be destroyed, and there must be too much interference in this institution because the consent is very difficult to prove in the court of law, right? Any which ways, if we take the history, if you go behind the history of this law, definitely it was a draconian law passed by the Britishers. In the year 1936, the Chief Justice in Britain, Matthew Haley, he said that if the husband cannot be guilty of rape committed by himself upon his lawful wife, right, for by their mutual matrimonial consent and contract the wife hath given up herself and her body in this kind unto her husband, which she cannot retract. The concept that by marriage a woman gave up her body to the husband was accepted as enduring principle of common law, right? That means by marriage a woman gives up her body to her husband was accepted as an enduring principle of common law, right? But this principle has now been abolished even in UK, right? In UK in 1991, the exception to marital rape was done away with in the case of R versus R, and the House of Lords said that a husband's immunity, which was expounded by Chief Justice Matthew Haley, no longer exists, and took the view that the time had arrived when the law should declare that a rapist remains a rapist subject to the criminal law irrespective of his relation with his victim. That means even the House of Lords said that a rape is a rape, a man is a man, an act is an act, correct? And no justification for marital exemption in rape, right? So in this sense, the judgment of Karnataka High Court has set the ball rolling and took a similar view of its duties as a constitutional court in the present case, and helped that the exemption to marital rape is regressive, right? And women is treated as subordinate to the husband, and which is against the constitutional guarantees given to the women, right? So very important news article, editorial page, The Hindu. Just go through it and expect a question coming from this, right? Moving ahead, so this I have given you the description of the same. Guys, the third article in the editorial page talks about the full repeal of AFSPA. We all know, guys, AFSPA stands for Armed Forces Special Powers Act. It came into existence in the year 1958 when there were rising Naga insurgency in Assam, Manipur, etc. Right. So in order to counter the Naga insurgency, the AFSPA came into being, and it gave special powers to the armed personals, right? Wherein they could also shoot the civilians if the law permits it. And definitely the governor of this respective state declares any area as disturbed area. At the moment an area has been declared as a disturbed area, AFSPA comes into force, and it gives unbridled power, exceptionally high powers to the armed forces, where they can even shoot the common man, the civilians, if they feel that they are violating the law. It also gives them the power to seize or any property, and also arrest any person without any charges or without any arrest warrant, right? So with time, by time, it has been seen that this act has been misused, and it has led to many human rights violations. And probably you've been knowing that in the last December 2021, right, in the month of December, 13 civilians were being shot dead by the armed forces, and in the name of AFSPA. So although recently the Ministry of Home Affairs has declared that the disturbed areas must be reduced, their numbers must be reduced, and accordingly the number of the disturbed areas has been reduced in Arunachal Pradesh, in Assam, in many other areas, right? As you can see, in Nagaland also it has been reduced. In Assam it has been reduced. In Manipur also it has been reduced, right? So in this sense, Nagaland, Assam, Manipur has seen the number of disturbed areas being reduced by the Ministry of Home Affairs, right? But as the things stand, the government's decision to relax the application of the act in a specific, seems to stem from reduction in violence, right? So the government is saying that there has been reduction in insurgency, in violence, and also because of the administrative reasons, rather than as a response to the burning question on whether the act is essential to security operations in these states, and which have experienced insurgencies of various degrees in the past, right? Guys, there have been many important committees which were being set up in the past, which sought to repeal AFSPA. A committee set up in the year 2005, which was headed by the retired Supreme Court Judge BP Jeevan Reddy. They also sought for the repeal of the AFSPA. So you may be asked on this that which among the following committees were being set up for the repeal of the AFSPA, or if you are a UPSC mains aspirant, you may always quote this statement. BP Jeevan Reddy committee in the year 2005, they also called for the repeal of AFSPA. At the same time, Supreme Court also appointed in the year 2013 the committee headed by retired Justice N. Santosh Hegde, right? So N. Santosh Hegde committee also suggested and it was being set up to investigate the encounter killings in Manipur, and it suggested that the act must be properly reviewed every 6 months, right? That means every 6 months there must be a review over the act, to see if the implementation is necessary, right, question mark, but extensions of the purview of the act have proceeded as routine affairs, right. So we have taken two facts from this article. Number one, BP Jeevan Reddy in the year 2005. Second, Justice N. Santosh Hegde Committee in the year 2013, which said that the act must be reviewed every 6 months. And in 2016, guys, the Supreme Court had also ruled that the armed forces could not be immune from investigations for excesses committed during the discharge of their duties, even in disturbed areas. That means it says that the armed forces should not be made immune, should not be protected from the investigation for their excesses in the even in the disturbed area. So that is also the third takeaway from this article, that Supreme Court in 2016 ruling that the armed forces should not be made completely immune from the excesses committed during their discharge of the duties, right. So I hope it is clear, right. So this is all about AFSPA, and a day before, possibly 2-3 days back, we also had an interesting session over the same AFSPA. You can just go through my previous recordings, right. That's all for today, guys. I hope you enjoyed the session. Stay tuned for more such updates, and we regularly do the daily news analysis, which is very, very helpful and vital for all the law aspirants and the UPSC aspirants. Wish you all the best. Do press the bell icon for the regular updates. Do like, share and comment. God bless you. Good day. Goodbye.